24th. This is the first time that we've been back in the chamber for over 12 months. So welcome back to the officers here this evening, and those other members who are non-cabinet members for attending. And thank you for those that are watching via YouTube. If we can move into tonight's agenda, minutes to authorise to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of March and the 8th of April as correct records of the proceedings.
So moved.
And the second. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
Chair.
Thank you. Additional agenda items, Malcolm?
There are none.
Urgent decisions, Malcolm, any urgent decisions have been called forward?
There are no urgent decisions, Chairman.
Disclosure of interest. You can see members of a personal or declarable opinion. Interest in matters on the agenda. So these are really interested in whether the members regard some personal interest as prejudicial under the terms of the Code of Conduct. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of an item in question. Okay. If we can go into tonight's agenda, we're going to start with item 9. On the basis that the lead officer on this has an extremely important engagement to get away to. So if I can just go into the agenda item 9, private sector leasing scheme, head of service, housing and community, Joe, if you can lead on this report, please.
Just to remind everybody, it's a key corporate plan target for the Rotherton Fine Scheme. To secure over 110 years bonus households by March 2023. And the proposals and recommendations before you are part of our plan to achieve that target of 110 per year. So there are two measures before you: one is a private sector leasing scheme and one is a rent guarantee scheme. I'll try and summarise those for you in order. So the private sector leasing schemes, to give you the headlines for that scheme, guaranteed fixed rent to property owners. The value of payment negotiated case by case, but will not exceed the LHA rate, which is the LHA rate that we receive charged to tenants when the council sublets the tenancy using non-secure tenancy agreements. Leases are fixed ahead of their period, which is agreed during the 3-month notice period. There'll be a break clause halfway through the tenancy or lease term, lease term of the property owner. So in terms of standards, we work to all statutory requirements, but also to the health and safety rating system. Moving all category 1 and trying to manage as well as we can category 2 as per that legislation. Property owners will retain full responsibility for the freehold, essentially, freehold responsibilities into the exterior fabric of the building, and the council will inherit the responsibility for the internal leasing responsibility as a leasehold. And there is insurance that we will return the property in the state will receive less fair than instead, and then there'll be inventory processes behind that as well. Property management is the plans to, in the first instance, while the scheme is relatively small in scale, is to use a third-party contractor to manage the contracts, the leases, and we hope that in time, if successful, as property management responsibilities grow with the various other schemes I've put before you in the past as well, that we will start to burgeon our own in-house management team further down the line. But obviously that will be future business case to come before you as and when required. In terms of the financial assessment, that's laid out for you in the report, and at Appendix A in particular, there's a summary at point 16 of the report, and more detail at Appendix A, as I say. The scheme will be funded using external homelessness prevention grant, which is an annual grant, and we predict 15 active leases in the first year and a second year of 15, giving us a total of 30 over the 2 years.
The cost of the financial business case does rely on a cost avoidance assumption, which we've used before in other temporary accommodation or measures and temporary accommodation avoiding measures, I should say. And you can see on at point 16 that the year one we avoid cost of a net cost of 11,000 and year two 7,000. But we mustn't forget the social benefits and impact on those families who avoid temporary accommodation and then get a secure, safe home to live in as a result. So, in terms of the rent guarantee scheme, we have. I'll summarise the points of the rent guarantee scheme for you. So, the guarantees will be issued for a 12-month period, after which the landlord will assume full rental liability. The council will be liable for up to 6 months rent over that period during the 12 months. So it's capped at 6 months, a value of 6 months. Guarantees will be approved for provided for assured short hold tenancies, which is the standard tenancy tenure in the private sector, and require a minimum fixed time, 12 months. They obviously must be assessed as affordable for the relevant tenant, and we'll have robust checks in place on the tenants to ensure that suitable tenants are put forward for the scheme. And we must have in writing from landlords 7 days ahead of, after they're aware of arrears, that we are notified promptly, and there's a good dialogue there. We have a tenancy sustainment officer already in place that supports the other tenant finder, and it will be her task to support the tenants to maintain their rent payments and sustain the tenancies effectively. We've at point 23 of the report, there's a summary of the various levels of arrears that we may expose ourselves to in terms of risk, from 100% down to 5%. We've pitched a business case at 20% arrears we'd be accepting potential liability for. The industry standard in the registered provider sector, which is akin to the sort of tenants we're talking about here, they operate at between 4 and 5% arrears, which they achieve. So 20% is a fairly conservative estimate. But even given that, you can see at point 25 of the report, a separate table that we're looking at for 30 leases in the order of around £50,000 of cost avoidance and temporary accommodation, as well as the social benefits, as I mentioned before, and the ethical benefits to those households. So I hope that the report speaks for itself in large part, and I'm happy to take questions on it now.
Right. Thank you very much, Joe. Before I invite the lead member to move this report, are there any questions here from members of the Cabinet this evening or any other councillors in attendance? No? Right. If I can invite Councillor Terry Byrne to move the report and make any comments accordingly. Terry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm delighted to move this report, summarising as well, Ben already has, but this is a foray into the private rented sector. There's something here for both sides of the equation. There's security of tenure, we hope, for those in rented accommodation. However, we also expect the guarantees of rent to improve the standard of private rented accommodation that we're offering. So the private rented sector is very uncontrolled, very ad hoc. We're trying to bring some order into it and try and look at the way we can use the private rented sector to help our residents. And more and more people are having to rent. So the more regulation we get, the better. What I would like to say is this is a remarkable piece of work. I'm sure any of you who had any questions will have found them answered. The financial analysis is great. The risk register, I think, is brilliant, because it is an area where we're dealing with individual private landlords, so we're dealing with individual, almost unregulated private businesses, and the risks there could be quite a lot. But Joe and his team have really analysed this, and I think they presented both the risks and the financial case very well. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to move it, and the purpose of the report, I'll just read it: to seek approval for private sector leasing scheme that will enable the council to provide tenancies to households that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and to seek approval to issue fixed-term rent guarantees to private sector landlords. So I would like to move that report.
Have you someone to second that report?
Yeah, I'd like to second.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Timpey. And if we can go to a vote on this, all those are in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. I might just add that when you speak, if we can make sure that you've got your microphone fairly close to you, I think that does improve the quality of the recording for those that are listening in or viewing in this evening. Thank you for that report, Joe, which I think has been acknowledged as an excellent piece of work, and for your team that's put that together. I know that you have an important engagement now, so by all means leave the chamber. Thank you very much indeed, and we move back to item agenda item 6, progress on the environment strategy. Report of the Environment and Policy Manager. Cabinet members Catherine, but I think Deborah, you're going to lead this report.
I am indeed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. If we can make sure that we are speaking clearly into this piece of equipment, because I'm told that the quality of sound otherwise doesn't get through to the other end. Right. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. The purpose of this report is to consider recommendations arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 15th of March 2021 regarding the progress made against the Environment Strategy 2020. The Environment Strategy was developed in 2019 and was adopted by members on the 21st of September 2020. Since her appointment to the role in August 2020, the Environment and Policy Manager has been leading on various initiatives contained within the strategy, including sustainable energy, protecting and enhancing biodiversity, environmentally friendly council working, and partnership working. The Environment Strategy has a commitment to develop partnerships in order to meet goals. And during the period of this review, covering the first 6 months of the strategy, the Environment and Policy Manager has made progress in working with local environmental groups and volunteers, Rother parish and town councils, and all on particular topics such as Bexhill Eye Tree Study, district-wide tree planting strategy, and electric vehicle charging project for council-owned car parks. Work has progressed on creating a framework and communications plan to aid stakeholder engagement, working alongside the communications team at East Sussex County Council. It has been established that the existing council staff and functions are already delivering many aspects of the core priorities as part of business as usual, and are actively seeking environmentally friendly initiatives when resources and the opportunity arises. Awareness has been raised across the council of the need to consider all aspects of the environment when procuring goods and services. And this awareness is supported by the modification of the officer's cabinet and committee reports to include a statement on environmental and sustainability implications of recommendations where relevant. Work is in progress with the planning policy officers to link various environmental projects with the new local plan, including the Bexhill Eye Tree Study and tree planting strategy, and putting to use information arising from the University of Brighton MSc students' project work on topics such as onshore and offshore wind mapping. Council grounds maintenance contract, which is in its 9th year and nearing its end, is being reviewed with the support of the Environment Manager to include more sustainable and biodiversity initiatives in preparation for a possible short-term extension period and in readiness to procure a new environmentally sustainable service contract in the future. It has been suggested this process may be further supported by inclusion in the Climate Change Steering Group's work programme. In conclusion, members are asked to note the progress made against the environment strategy and consider the recommendations that the review of the grounds maintenance contract be included in the Climate Change Steering Group's work. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deborah, for bringing that forward. And are there any members that would like to ask a question before I invite Councillor Field to move on this motion? I think an awful lot of work has been put in when you consider that we're, just 18, 19 months down the line, and we've made tremendous progress in an area that we felt was so important for us to support as a new administration. Catherine, if I can invite you, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to move this report, and I have got a few comments I'd just like to make. And first of all, I would like to thank Deborah Keneally for a very full and useful introduction to the report. The work is huge and extensive, and actually it can be as extensive and huge as you want. It's got the potential just to grow and grow and grow. But I think Deborah and her team and Christina have kept it under control. I think a really important aspect of this is the dual focus, that we're looking internally and externally at the work we do with our partners to make sure that our objectives are being complied with. We heard reference today to the presentations made by the MSc students, which were absolutely fascinating and of a really high quality. One of the things that really struck me was the fact that reckless damage to trees, and there has been a lot by trimmers and mowers, by our contractors, actually counts as criminal damage. So we can take action against that if we wish, without any amendment to the contracts whatsoever. And I was very pleased as well to hear about wind power today, which apparently is the cheapest form of energy of any sort at all. And we've certainly got plenty of potential for harnessing wind energy around this coast. I don't understand the comment in the report, actually, that we might need to change our way of working when Bexhill Town Council comes into being, which it already has, because the council in the rural areas works perfectly well with town and parish councils, and I don't see our work being at all impacted by the arrival of Bexhill Town Council. It's just another thing. I do so agree that we should be reviewing grounds maintenance contract in the climate change emergency steering group, and I've got that wrong and I can never remember what we're called, but that one. I think an awful lot of similar work could be going through that group to avoid duplication and to cut down timescales, because I know that overview and scrutiny is very busy in itself, and we are a kind of limb of that. So yes, I would have no hesitation in moving the report. But I do think, when I just say that when we're looking at annual reviews of the strategy and indeed reviews of contract, they should be slightly fluid and flexible, simply because if we enshrine our targets in tablets of stone, we run the risk then of falling behind the science, which is changing very quickly. So we must make sure we have capacity to react and lead when we're taking those steps. So with that, I would say, can I please move this report?
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine, and thank you for the knowledge that you have in this particular area and the way that we've been able to entrust the role to you as Cabinet Lead. Invite Councillor Projak to second.
Very happy to second this. It is a challenge, for the reasons that Councillor Field has said. I mean, things are changing. The government is slowly catching up. And this autumn we've got COP26 coming up, so I dare say they'll speed up a bit. I think the thing with our council is, I think all our lead officers have got the message that it's time to look at everything we do and assess whether it's going to increase our carbon production or not. And I think the challenge we've got is perhaps officers have got is actually to get that right through the whole organisation. It was interesting the other day, we were at a meeting with Deborah Keneally, and she was talking about installing a new piece of equipment that needed electricity, and Councillor Field straight away asked, well, is it a green electricity? And Deborah Keneally was able to get back and say, yes, it is. And it's what things are made of, and what power we use. It's all those things. And I think a symptom of the problem is that we've got these tick boxes at the end of reports, and the tick boxes actually don't tell the story at all, because probably every decision we make tonight has got an impact on the environment. So I think we'd like to look at that again, those tick boxes, to find a better way of making sure that every report is actually thinking about the environmental impact. I'm sure they all think about the financial impact, but not always about the environmental impact. But I think heads of service are better able to judge that in their departments than we are. And so that's a plea really to heads of service.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we go to a vote on that, if I can just invite Councillor Paul Osborne, who was chair of the Scrutiny Committee, who did look at this and made some observations as recommended. Paul, thank you for your work on this and the team.
That's right. Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that Christina, the policy manager, she had a presentation ready for us for overview and scrutiny, and literally 10 seconds before she was about to start, she had a power outage or internet failure or something. So she was all ready to give us a presentation and had a technical issue, I think, would be fair to say. So that was a shame because she put a lot of work into this. But no, I've nothing sort of specific to add, really. It's just the way the council has to work, to be honest. It's a difficult one to get around. You know, like the grounds maintenance contract, as we said, you know, you can now get decent quality chainsaws and strimmers that last for a bit longer than 20 minutes. And that is, you know, is that the way that contractors are going to have to go down with when they buy new equipment, rather than spinning around with a 4-stroke engine going for 9 hours at a time, strimming? You use a battery one, with a couple of spare batteries, and be a lot more quieter as well. So that's the way sort of things are going to have to be. Not sure how long a battery lawnmower would last and how much it would cost. But you might get a few stripes and then it'd turn into a no-mow May, wouldn't it, for a bit? So, so no, I've nothing to add. But I'm on the environment group as well, so we all work together on it and we'll work it out somehow.
Thank you, Paul, for your comments on that. And I think if we go to a vote on those, on the resolution items 1, 2 and 3 as per the report, are those in favour? And that's passed unanimously. And I think we've made an awful lot of progress. Our environment strategy, and I know that members, Sue in particular, says it's going to be part of our DNA. So that's where we're going, and we're moving forward on this. So thank you very much indeed, Deborah, for the report this evening. Right, let me go into item 7, recommendations of the off-street car park task and finish group. This is a report led by Deborah this evening, Head of Service Neighbourhood Services, and the lead member is Councillor Catherine Field. So if I can invite you, Deborah, please, to lead the report.
Thank you, Chairman. This report summarises the work of the off-street car parks task and finish group and pulls together the recommendations for approval. At the end of September 2020, East Sussex County Council implemented civil parking enforcement, which transferred responsibility for on-street parking enforcement from the police to East Sussex County Council, and implemented a variety of restrictions throughout Rother, including charges to park on certain roads in Bexhill, Battle and Rye, resident parking bays, limited parking hours, and enforcement of double yellow lines. With reference to the civil parking enforcement overview and scrutiny report back in 2018, the then task and finish group was asked to reform following the implementation of the civil parking enforcement to review the impact back to the committee. Subsequently, it was agreed that the impact of on-street charging and parking restrictions on council-owned car parks should also be reviewed, and so the off-street car parks task and finish group reformed in October 2020 to review the use of council-owned car parks. And then from April 2021, work to inform the 12-month annual review of parking enforcement led by East Sussex County Council, who will report in early 2022. It should be noted that the East Sussex County Council first annual review of on-street parking enforcement is open now for feedback from all members of the public until the end of September 2021, and everyone is encouraged to submit their views via the East Sussex website. The Car Parks Task and Finish Group was asked to consider car park charges, car park hours of operation, and use of car park permits, whilst taking into account the need to generate sufficient revenue to maintain all aspects of the car park provision. Following a call for evidence from a variety of car park users, paragraph 15 of the report shows that the overwhelming response from the parishes, town councils, businesses, community groups and sports clubs was that they could not provide accurate and appropriate feedback due to COVID-19 restrictions and lockdowns, preventing people going about their normal routines and businesses being closed. The feedback requested an extension to the review, and as this supported the views of the Task and Finish Group, an extension was agreed until October 2021. However, some changes were identified that could be of benefit to users now, and the officer recommendations are as follows: that Wainwright Road, Bexhill, Gibbets Marsh Car Park in Rye, and Lower Market Car Park in Battle be designated as long stay car parks, and the daily parking charges be reduced to encourage use as soon as reasonably practical, along with appropriate signage to promote these car parks as long stay. That chargeable hours be brought in line across all council-owned car parks, starting at 8 AM and finishing at 7 PM. And finally, that a cash and card payment machine be installed at Manor Barn Gardens car park. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And I would like to acknowledge the work that was put in by this very long sort of task group, OSCPT and FG task group. I don't know who made that name up, but thank you, Paul, for bringing that together. And this evening, Councillor Vicky Hook is here, who chaired that. And is there any comment you'd like to make before I invite members of Cabinet to ask any questions, Vicky?
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, Chair. I would appreciate that. I'll repeat that. Thank you very much indeed, Chair, for allowing me to speak at this Cabinet meeting. I would like to move the acceptance of the recommendations of the Car Park Task and Finish Group. Once again, I would like to thank members of the committee for their dedication to this task, and also to thank officers with particular reference to Lindsay Goodsall for her very valuable assistance and contributions. But in particular, I'd like to thank local councillors for their earnestness to ensure that their residents are uppermost in our considerations regarding the Manor Gardens car park and the installation of a card and cash payment machine at this site. So yes, I would like to move that the Cabinet accept our recommendations, which have already been approved at overview and scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. The report will be moved by the Cabinet lead, but I understand your support on that and for the work that you've done. Paul, would you like to make any comment before I invite any members of Cabinet to make a further observation?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's basically as it is. We've got probably obviously wasn't asked if we could reduce the cost of the charges on the long stay car parks, but it was thought that they're not well used, and if we reduce the costs, then it's sort of a stack them high and sell them cheap sort of stuff. If we encourage people to use them, hopefully we make more money out of it. Well, not that we should, but the sort of loss of income shouldn't be so bad. Plus it assists people with parking. We spoke to Bexhill Battle members who sort of directed us with Lower Market on the £3 a day, so they're happy with that. We spoke to members from Rye with regard to Gibbets Marsh, and obviously members in Bexhill as well with regard to Wainwright Road. So if we can sort of get that sorted out, then that would be very useful. Again, the charging hours, as Vicky said, and brought those in line with the sort of times of the on-street parking. So that sort of one's not fighting against the other one. It sort of seems silly if you're going to charge till 8 o'clock for one, but you can park on street for nothing. So you're going to lose out there. Also, we got the number 3 there was the improved signage. It's awkward. I know Jewett Marsh has been sort of designated as a long stay car park for probably 15 years or more. But the signage has never sort of been that good. But you know, if people used it, they would know that it's a simple walk into town, and sort of business people in town, they could use it easily, and it would be as cheap, and it's actually cheaper than the market car park. So that's what we're sort of fighting against. If we charge £5 on Jewett Marsh, the market car park is £2.50, then you know, why would you park out of town when you can park in the middle of town and use the market? So that's another way of their thinking there. And again, as Councillor Cook said, with Manor Garden, Councillor Courtauld made a good case there, and there was concern over people using it who couldn't sort of get around the mobile phone apps and the rest of it, and just wanted an old school meter, which probably would be the way forward. With much easier for people and more well used. It's also worth saying that we're, as I sort of envisaged, the group would then sort of morph into looking at the on-street parking and reporting on that later on in the year. So we sort of keep the same numbers and makeup of people on the group, and so we've got the knowledge there to carry it forward, and hopefully car parks will be well used. One thing good on the car, it was difficult for us to get sort of sensible data, but Canberra actually did have quite an increase in usage because nobody could go abroad, so they all went to Canberra instead. So yeah, it's useful. But yeah, no, I hope the Cabinet support the officer recommendations and those that have come from the working group and the scrutiny committee.
Thank you very much, Paul, for those comments and the work put in by that group. I think this is what sort of hit me with this was that we put the customers first. We really have put the customer first, and that's really what we're about. We've listened. I think the car parking is like waste, isn't it? It touches all of our residents in some way, shape, or form, especially those living within the urban streets of Bexhill and the impact of Bexhill. So I think it's a really good
put forward, really good evidence from members to support this. I've collected quite a lot of evidence from local residents, which I know that the Councillor Cook took into consideration, and the members of the Task and Finish group. But I've got a couple of questions. I just wonder, I'm very grateful that this matter has been resolved tonight, which means that the changes can be implemented quite quickly, and I'd be grateful to know exactly when the charge can drop from £5 to £2. I think it's quite a simple mechanism for Wainwright Road and the other car parks that we've discussed, but I would just grateful if we could have a date for that, so that residents know that they can use it at the reduced price. And secondly, when can we have a look at the season ticket prices? Because obviously this, we're not resolving tonight to put that down, and the season ticket price for Wainwright Road remains at £321, which if you bought a yearly ticket and you had 4 weeks holiday, would just be marginally beneficial. It would be good to know the answer to those two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Deborah, have you got the answers to those two questions?
Got the answer to one, Chairman. In terms of introducing the new car parking charges, there is a cost to this, to our contractor to come along and change all the machines, a considerable cost. And we were hoping to combine that with the changes in hours and charging times to keep the costs down. And one item takes longer than the other. So to change the prices is reasonably straightforward and can be done after advertising and putting notices up in the relevant car parks. But you're still looking at perhaps 4 weeks to instigate that. It's still a legal process to go through. Whereas the changes in hours has to go through a variation order, which has to be advertised and go through a certain protocol as well legally. So we could do the two separately, but it would just be more expensive, or we can wait and do the changes in prices first. That's the answer to that question.
Councillor Braidis, does you make a comment on that?
Well, I think people would be very disappointed that I mean, this is not putting prices up. This is putting prices down. And if we're arguing that we have to put a notice up to say that actually we're going to put the prices down, I'm afraid that might not particularly be very customer focused. That's just my view.
Any other observations? That's how it is. I suppose that's how it is. But if we can't short circuit that, Councillor Timpey.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask, Manor Gardens car park, the machine that we're hoping to get, as the ward member, I'm thrilled. You know, and thanks, Paul, for all your help with all that. Is there a long lead time? I imagine you're nodding. I don't want to probably know this, do I?
Yes, well, we have already sort of pre-ordered one in the hope that it would go through, sort of, but it's still coming from abroad, unfortunately. So yes, it's all dependent on shipping and delivery. I would hope it would be with us by the beginning of July, but I can't guarantee that.
Okay.
But there is quite a long lead time on it.
Okay.
But we've already started it.
We just need to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm very pleased to see a reduction in car parking charges to make it more affordable to park and work in our towns. And I think this is a step forward that we must fill our car parks and make it as reasonable as possible for our residents. I think one thing that the report hasn't noted is that we are not the only provider of car parking in our towns. Rye has a number of other operators, and Battle has English Heritage, which are our competitors. So to match, certainly in Battle, the £3 that English Heritage charge per day is a good idea. Continuing your theme of putting the customer first, I'd like to propose a further recommendation, please, that number 5, the Off-Street Car Park Task and Finish Group research the selling of weekly tickets by Ringo and our parking machine.
Yes, I can invite Malcolm to comment on that.
Just on point of clarity, just is it just weekly, or do we want to look at flexible means of ticket purchase?
And what do you mean by that?
Well, what I was thinking is monthly, quarterly, etc.
We now offer our season tickets on a monthly direct debit basis, so I would have thought there's not the need for monthly, because if people want to do that, they would get a season ticket and pay monthly for them. This is really for where we are now having the cheaper long stay car parks. If someone's working in the town, it's far easier for them to buy one weekly ticket at the beginning of the week, put it on their car. They don't have to worry about finding the money or ringing Ringo or all of that every day of the week. So it's a putting a customer, you've got the option there. I'm not necessarily saying make it any cheaper, just the option of doing many days at one time in order to make it easier for everyone.
Okay. Any comments on that? Deborah, would you like to make any comment on?
We could certainly explore that in terms of Ringo and the Flowbird provider that we use.
Okay. So that will be incorporated within the recommendation to be resolved this evening, to research and explore the availability or flexibility of weekly tickets. Yeah. Does that seem to be, Catherine? Yeah, Councillor Field is nodding to that. Okay. Perhaps you would now like to just take the report forward, Catherine, and move it. And
yes, thank you. I mean, I would move it, please, and I think that's a really sensible thing to suggest from Councillor Dixon. Also thank Deborah for her introduction and Councillor Cook and her little band for the work they have done. Having sat on a car park working group in a previous iteration, in a previous council, I know firsthand what an awful job it can be and how complicated and how time consuming, and how actually you never win because you can never please all of the people all of the time, or indeed some of the people any of the time. So thank you for all that work. And I really don't think that it is going to be the end of the story. I don't think it's a perfect solution because, like CPE, these things only really work when they're regularly fine-tuned, which is why I think the working group should be continuing to monitor the situation as we go along. I am, though, very disappointed to see that in the box at the end of this report that says, has it got an impact on the environment? It says no. Now, I can't think of very many things which are more impactful on the environment than driving your car around, parking it somewhere in the district. So I really do think, actually, that this whole report and car parking in general has a role to play in environmental damage limitation. But with all that, I will move the report.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure that point will be taken and noted for supplementary reports coming forward. Is there someone to second this? I think Councillor Bayliss, thank you very much indeed.
Yes,
Another question?
Can I just make a plea now that can we take some legal advice about this notice for 4 weeks? I can understand why we need to issue a notice and have it up 4 weeks when we're putting the price up. But this is about putting the price down, and I cannot see that anybody is going to object to that in any shape or form. And we are trying to promote COVID recovery here. This is about making our town centre more effective, more sustainable going forward. And I'm just very disappointed that we have that time delay.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I think that perhaps we could invite officers to implement as soon as possible on this, because I think the message is such that it's a customer first. There are some excellent initiatives here, and as Councillor Field said, this will evolve and we'll have to monitor it. And we've got an ongoing task group to look at the whole aspect of this. But I think it's a start, and we've made some real progress on this. And I'd like to think also that our enforcement officers wouldn't be out there at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, especially in Manor Gardens, where the ladies who have their choral practice there are a little bit wary of getting up there and then getting a ticket. So I'm sure that there will be some reasonable sort of discretion being used by our enforcement officers for that sort of thing, especially at Manor Gardens. So we've moved it, we've seconded it, and we can vote on that, including the yes, Councillor Bayliss. Yes, thank you very much indeed. And if we can include that amendment that was put forward by Councillor Dixon. So those in favour? And that's unanimous again. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Deborah, for the work put in. Thank you, Paul, for your team, and Vicky and those other councillors, which I know Councillor Portell is here this evening, who really did listen to residents locally in order to bring this forward. And I'm sure that it will be ongoing. There will be further adaptations to where we are. Just bear with me a second. Something's happened. Right. Okay. Agenda item 8. Key performance targets, set of service acquisitions, transformation, regeneration. Report this evening, please, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members will remember that on 1st of March, I brought the original KPI set to Cabinet for consideration. It's subsequently been sent to overview and scrutiny for further consideration by that committee, with a number of recommendations coming back to this. The primary concerns were about two main things. Firstly, the members of the Over and Scrutiny Committee identified concerns about the length of time taken for planning decisions to be made, given the also the implementation of measures to bring this back into order and to reduce that time. It was felt that it might be pertinent to now start recording any improvements in that as part of that scrutiny process, included within a number of health check indicators that we provide as part of standard performance monitoring towards the chief executive. We have two key indicators that that might be beneficial, and that is the number of calendar days that is taken to consider a major planning application and the number of calendar days that are taken to consider a minor planning application, and that's from submission validation all the way through to a decision. So that measures the entire length of the process, and we can provide an average number for that. So what we would hope to see, obviously, with the implementation of the support from Capita as that comes forward, as well as implementation of the review, the planning review that's being undertaken at this stage, we'd hope to see that number come down, and this is an opportune moment to start measuring the impact that those things will have. So that was one recommendation. The other part was, and I know that the lead member for environmental management will probably agree with me here as well, was that the climate change indicators could be beefed up. It was hoped that I'd be having a meeting with the lead member prior to this meeting. That's not happened for a number of reasons, but we are meeting this week, and what I'm hoping to do is be able to discuss an appropriate KPI or performance measure that can be included in those overview and scrutiny reports going forward. So in terms of feedback back to this committee and asking for permission, in terms of the reason why no specific recommendation was made by overview and scrutiny is because there was a question over whether or not overview and scrutiny was the right place to scrutinise the performance of the planning process, being that they report regularly to the planning committee. Having taken the consideration of the monitoring officer, there's no reason why overview and scrutiny shouldn't also look at this as part of the corporate performance rather than specifically just working, with regards to the planning performance. And so we're happy to make the following recommendations: that those two KPIs be included into the KPI set for members of the overview and scrutiny committee to consider in the quarterly reports, and that we may come back with a further amendment to this process following a meeting with the lead member for environmental management, ensuring that we are better monitoring the impact of the climate change agenda. Chair, I'll take any questions.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much. Before I invite Councillor Kevin Dixon to lead on this report, are there any members who would like to ask any questions of Ben? Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much as a question of Ben, but it's just on the sort of planning performance. Really, it came up at our committee, and it's sort of a double-edged sword. We know there's issues with planning, but my sort of argument would be, if we then sort of say let's do a scrutiny on it, we're then taking officers away from the day-to-day work, which they're getting behind on, to sort of write up reports, which then potentially makes things worse. So that's my sort of concern was that. We were told by sort of a couple of members who also have been or were on or are on the planning committee that monthly reports do go to planning committee, on performance. So that's sort of that's good to know. But again, if it's needed, then should we do it? There's nothing wrong in giving us an indicator. We know there's issues there. We had the email come recently from the planning department saying the length of time on applications is taking longer. So what again, what I wouldn't want to do is take officer time in reporting to a committee, which then makes it worse. It's an awkward one.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I feel quite strongly on this issue. We have KPIs to make sure the council is running along the tracks it's supposed to be running along, and we have a corporate responsibility to make sure that happens, and planning is part of that corporate responsibility. And any KPIs that aren't met, any service which is discovered to be not meeting its targets, actually provides a real reputational risk to the whole council, which is why I think it's a bit wrong for the planning committee to be judge and jury on its own performance. Not that I have any problem with the planning committee, but I think it's absolutely right that those KPIs should sit in a more corporate overviewing framework. by the scrutiny meeting. And I wouldn't have thought it would make an awful lot of extra work, because surely the staff have that information anyway.
If I can invite Councillor Jonathan Vinehall, please.
Well, I think we're all aware of the issues with the planning department, and they do precede the COVID emergency, unfortunately. But that is the point of the planning review, which is intended to change processes to improve. And I think the implementation of those, which will happen over a period of time, will improve performance, and we should measure that improvement. That is without any doubt. But people tend to want performance statistics when things aren't going well, and when they're going well, they don't really care. The point is that we have to get the system working properly, and then there'll be less need. I don't think the planning committee is any less critical than the overview and scrutiny committee or anyone else about the performance of the planning department, which is all reasons in the world, but our objective has to be to fix the underlying problem first. And then the statistics will look very nice, but we should be measuring them, and I don't have any personal objection to those being reported to the full council or the overview and scrutiny committee. And I think through the review process, one of the things is there is a real need for investment in IT, and part of that can automate some of those statistics to alleviate the need for officers to be generating reports. There is a lot of manual work that goes on to produce all sorts of statistics in planning, and that's one of the issues.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And I think we do need to monitor. It's important that we do monitor, especially progress and improvement. Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Thank you, Chairman. And before I move this, I'd like to ask the Chief Executive, on the spot question, it just occurred to me, does the Planning Committee have the ability to report back to Cabinet, or is it independent of itself, and is the scrutiny route the only way that we would get a report back to Cabinet on planning performance?
I may have to take advice on that one. I'm not sure that planning actually has a role in performance monitoring, a formal role. You know, currently under the Constitution, it would be a scrutiny role. Having said that, any indicator that's falling behind target should be reported to scrutiny anyway, as a matter of course. So that would be happening. I think the important bit, as Councillor Vinehall has said, is to deal with the root cause of the issue, and actually to take that forward, which is members have referred to tonight, which we are through the review, and we will be implementing that immediately, because there are a number of things that we can do in the short term, medium term, and long term. Long term not meaning months away, but in relative terms. I know that doesn't give you the answer, Councillor Dixon, but it's the position as I understand it.
Thank you, Chairman. Then I'm happy to move the report with that recommendation.
Yeah, by all means, before we ask for someone
Before
to
you
second
vote,
it. Yeah.
I might make one comment, and I'm going to thank Councillor Byrne for a suggestion he made in another meeting about 18 months ago, and that was that we should be generally looking at trend reports as much as snapshots. And we introduced that to the statutory reports that have to be done in planning. So it shows quarter by quarter the trends, and I think we're up to about 6 quarters now, and it really does help understand exactly what's going on in terms of the number of applications we have. Not all the statistics we might want, but certainly a lot of them, and that has really helped understand and helped us to bring us to the point of doing that review. And those reports are pretty easily available. So I suggest anyone who wants to really understand what's going on, have a look at those too.
Ben, is it possible that these trend reports on these can be fitted into the other areas that we're monitoring?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the try to limit the number of KPIs that go to scrutiny specifically, and sort of try to limit it to these two, which give a general feel to how planning is performing against the given targets. But of course, and those when presented to overview and scrutiny will include trends as well, because it's data that's already measured. So we'll include the trend analysis as part of that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sue Projer.
Yeah, just sorry, another comment. I know you want to take the vote, but I think The thing that about failures in the planning department is that it disproportionately affects our reputation. It's like bin collections and planning, the two things. And it seems to me, I agree with Councillor Field, that actually we should have this corporate responsibility. The issue now is that it has only just started to look at trends. The issue now is we've got the review done. We know what has to be done, has to be changed, has to be improved. What we need now, really need, and this is the council, we really need to say, is it making a difference? Because we are spending quite a lot of money on extra help, extra resources. What we really need, and perhaps not, those are not just the government statistics that we're required to do, which the planning department do anyway, so it wouldn't be extra work, but maybe need to look a bit more closely at how things are improving, because that's the story we want to hear.
Yes, Councillor Reinhardt.
Sorry to drag a point out here. You wouldn't get along to a vote. There was a point made the other day, which I think I'll raise again. And once again, I think Councillor Byrne and I discussed this. The KPIs are one thing, they're the performance indicators. But what we have here with a number of the things we do are demand-led services. So when the demand increases with planning, you've got sort of a perfect storm. You've got resource issues and increases in applications or enforcement at the same time, but with a fixed resource, and that's the issue. And one thing that KPIs do, KPIs might highlight the problem, but what we're not doing is understanding how we can flex the resource or have the resource to deal with those ups and again the downs. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps overview and scrutiny might give some consideration to, because that is the underlying issue. Not that we have an increase and the fact that we can't deal with it, but how we are going to deal with it.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. We have a second on this, I believe. Do we, Councillor Jerry Byrne? Thank you. And if we can go to a vote. Those in favour? Very much indeed. Unanimous. Right, just bear with me. Item 10. We've already dealt with item 9, so just threw me a bit. So Head of Service Strategy and Planning, Tim Hickling, updated statement of community involvement to approve the draft statement of community involvement for a 6-week public consultation. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Cabinet. The statement of community involvement sets out how and when the Council will carry out consultations and involve the community in both the preparation of planning policy documents and the determination of planning applications. And the current SCI was adopted in December 2018. This updated SCI at Appendix 1, which now includes input from the Council's Equalities Officer, including particularly paragraph 3.21, is put forward for approval in draft form for the purposes of a 6-week public consultation over the summer period. The document is set out in 3 main sections, which covers the general principles, planning policy and development management. And there are 3 areas to highlight. Firstly, there is now a greater focus on early engagement in both the local plan process and within pre-applications. Secondly, the SCI incorporates the recent changes to public speaking arrangements at Planning Committee, and that's set out in paragraph 4.3. And finally, the SCI makes reference to the opportunity to engage through online platforms such as Microsoft Teams and Zoom. There's also a reference in paragraph 4.14 to the changes relating to the closure of the Rye Community Help Point. Planning documents would typically be made available for public viewing, and how this will have an impact on how documents can be made publicly available. The draft SCI sets out how the Council will involve different sectors of the community, from individual members of the public through to local organisations, in preparing plans and considering planning applications. Timing of the consultation is deemed to be appropriate in advance of the statutory consultation in the forthcoming local plan. Although it's worth noting that the revised requirements to review the SCI is only once every 5 years. So the public consultation will follow the guidance of the SCI itself. Paragraph 3.11 of the document refers. It will utilise the local plan consultation database, which includes statutory and non-statutory consultees, town and parish councils and individuals who have expressed an interest. Also those registered on the Agents Forum database. Consultation will also include My Alerts and a notice in the local press. It is therefore recommended to the Cabinet that the draft SCI attached to Appendix 1 is published for public consultation for a 6-week period. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Tim. Are there any questions of Tim? Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin Dixon.
Just a comment, really, Chairman, and it's something that my colleague, Councillor Field, I thought someone else should say at this time, is again in the report, the environmental says no. But it is, environmental is yes, because having Zoom, having Teams and meeting people online and not having them to leave their houses, officers not having to drive to places and carry out public consultations has got to be a fantastic thing for the environment. And I do think we need to be thinking and looking about this in all these reports and actually seeing where we can make easy wins like that. And I'm glad to see in the report that it is mentioned that this is a way that we should be doing consultations now. I think the general public are far happier using such methods than they were a year ago. But we should be actually acknowledging that is a great win for the environment and a win for us. And I think I'd like that to be maybe altered in the minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for making that point, which I think is endorsing what was made earlier on. Councillor Terry Byrne.
Thank you. This is just a bit of special pleading in the area of early engagement. Now, I know officer time for pre-planning consultation is very valuable, but I would like to think that any plans brought forward by a community land trust or similar sort of cooperative organisation would come to the top of the queue when it came to early planning engagement. These are often organisations without the professional expertise of some of the other plans, and early engagement really does enable them to keep their enthusiasm going. It's awful if you go down halfway down the track and then find out if only you had early engagement, the planners could have said, well, that's a non-starter, or focus over there. So special pleading for housing, please can we have early engagement with community land trusts?
Thank you. And I'm sure you, when there is such an occasion, that you will remind the officers of your plea.
I will indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Project.
Thank you. Thank you. And engagement is a really challenging area for council work. And certainly in the past, we haven't all been too clever at it. And the evidence that I have for that is then we had the call for sites and the sites allocated in the last local plan. There were a number that should never have been allocated. And it seems to me that that was a lack of public engagement, public consultation. It's a real challenge. And the government are proposing to bring in a new system of planning where at the front end of the plan, that's when you need your engagement, because that's probably be the only time when councillors and public can actually have a say and a control over things. So it's just one of those processes that's easy to write down and really difficult to do well. So I think we have to use every avenue we can think of to engage with the public. And it'd be interesting actually to use a lot of the methods we've been using, Zoom Teams meetings, etc. Because as one meeting we had 900 people, 700. So a lot. Yeah. So we can attract audiences if we want to. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that that's a very relevant, and I think the way that we are as an administration looking to engage through your roles, Council Project, with the parishes, and we are getting closer to our resident base, and it's very difficult when we've got this wide open district that we have that's covering many hundreds of kilometres and some 32 towns and parishes. But yeah, we do need to engage. I think we are really making some real progress with that. Every member of this cabinet, a member of this administration, are getting out there and engaging. and that's part of the way forward. So if we can invite Councillor Vinehall to lead this report.
Thank you. I will propose it in a moment. Reputation, Chairman. I think we've heard the word once already tonight. Putting residents at the centre of everything we do, which is what we have in our emerging corporate plan. The fact is that the impact of the planning department is disproportionate on the reputation of the council. The majority of residents engage with the council in either planning or waste, not having their bins picked up. And that's where they see their council rates go. And so that means that we must work even harder to engage in a positive and useful way. And it is a challenge. It is always a challenge, and it goes beyond the planning document that we see here. This administration, I'm really pleased, and particularly in this area, if you look at items 6, 7 and 8, the early engagement on the plan making, there was activity planned, but I'm really pleased to say with my colleague, Councillor Prochak, we asked the officers, and they duly did this, provided a far more detailed early engagement on the local plan. In fact, it went to the whole district, it went to towns and parishes, and it went to interested groups, and the response has been really positive, and that is now moving to the next stage with the meeting with members, I think, is now planned for the 2nd of July. That, as it happens, that is even more important, particularly from the comments that Councillor Prochak just made, because if the planning system does change, that early engagement will be just the thing which would have been required, and that we wouldn't have done if we hadn't insisted upon it. Public speaking at planning committee, there was a public speaking system, and that was fine, but we expanded that, and it has been extraordinarily successful. Yes, it does sometimes add to the length of meetings, but it is only ever proportionate to the importance of any of those larger planning applications, and I think it has been received well. Yes, it does add a little bit more, but I think it adds significantly more in the impact on the engagement and how those affected by those planning decisions feel about those decisions. They have had their opportunity to speak and give their opinion, whether it be for or against an application. And the increased scope of Teams and Zoom, well, we all know that, we've experienced it. As soon as the lockdown came last year, I was annoying the executive directors at the time, saying that planning committee should be online because Wealden was already online and I wanted to get in there, and it affected all of us, and it has gone online, and it's been very successful for all meetings, but planning meetings particularly have typically 350 viewers. I think the last one was down to about 100 because we only had 2 applications, but in March we had 700. Now, you couldn't imagine 700 people turning up here, even to some of the biggest things that we've had. And so, you know, that is a really, really positive thing that this administration has done to improve early engagement. So, and I thank the planning department for this report, Tim, and would like to propose it on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And have got someone seconding this?
Yes, I'm second.
Right, okay. Councillor Prochak, Councillor Baylor, thank you both for seconding that. So we've got 2 seconds, is that allowed? If we can vote on that, those in favour of the recommendations and the reason and the purpose of the report, those in favour, unanimous, thank you very much indeed. I think that basically brings the Cabinet meeting to a conclusion this evening. Thank you, officers, for attending. Thank you for other councillors attending and those people that have tuned into YouTube. I hope they found that it was interesting enough to tune in next time round. So thank you, everybody, and we'll call tonight's meeting at a close, which is something like whatever time it is, 7.